All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It's been a while. I don't think I've done a indie game dev diary update since probably. Let's go look at the YouTube channel. It's been a while. Um, October of last year. So it's been what, November, December, January, February, 4 months basically since we did the last update. The last episode was on shipping costs and stuff, and so we were diving into the realities of shipping. Um, this, there's a lot of stuff I want to cover in this episode because this is kind of like the first one I've done in a while. Say hello to my Bandichan, which looks funny on the green screen, um, which is new, and lights are coming on Monday. I think they're arriving. Anyway, uh, what sparked me to jump back in and jump on this right away? I've been meaning to record an episode for about 3 weeks now. I was going to do it in January, and then I had a horrible, nasty bronchitis cold for literally about 4 weeks in January. So this just got pushed off, and then we got so busy in the month of February, and it's not lessening up. So there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about in terms of what this update is really about. Um, we're going to cover a lot of different things in this episode, all of it related to production of an MMORPG. So that's let's just call that the title, production. um, Production realities, realities of producing an independent MMORPG. Um, but before we jump into that, one of the first things I want to talk about real quick is on the back of the previous episode that we did, which was all about um, crowdfunding and shipping costs. And I mentioned in that video why a lot of these crowdfunded games have issues and end up failing. It's because they don't factor in the shipping costs. This came up again in the recent topic of the week discussion we were having over on the forums um, regarding subscription costs and the economics of running an MMORPG, and people brought up um, physical goods and why they thought physical goods was a good way for a company to make money, and that tied directly into the conversation about shipping costs because one of the things that no one anticipates is, for example, that international shipping is going to kill you. Uh, we have had to pay more than $30 per book to ship books to Australia, as an example. Um, the the retail book doesn't even sell for that. The retail book sells for $25. So it costs more to ship the book to Australia than it does to actually buy the book. So that should go to kind of as an extreme version of why physical items aren't a good idea for an independent company. Um, that should be a lesson to everyone in terms of that's why we're not doing physical stuff. But I do want to talk about production realities. So, um, since the last time we met, let me look at the YouTube channel real quick because I know at one point I was talking about I think the multitasking episode, which was in the beginning of October, talked about me jumping in and doing VFX on the Saga of Lucimia. Um, my hand is wrapped, by the way, because I have major tendonitis issues in these two fingers. Basically, in this part of my hand, um, directly related to years growing up in the construction industry and the ceramic tile and natural stone industry. So one of the things that I had to do from the time I was about 7 years old, I would be on job sites helping, and then from the time I was 7 up until I was 27, so 20 years basically, squeezing sponges. That's one of the things that you do every single day when you're doing ceramic tile and natural stone is you're squeezing a sponge and cleaning tile and you're cleaning concrete and cleaning tools and all this other stuff. And just after 20 years, I wore out the tendons in this particular hand. This one doesn't bother me that much. Um, Typically, I don't have problems until um, when I have to type a lot. Which is why, by the way, I use Dragon Naturally Speaking for most of my production work. I'm on version. I haven't updated in a while. I don't know what version I'm on right now. Doesn't really matter. I've been using it as a program since I don't know 2000. 10 or so, so 9 or 10 years. But what I don't typically use it for is emails and comments when they're short, but those things add up. So over the course of the beginning part of the week, we had a lot of stuff going on at different websites, and so I was doing a lot of comments, um, and ended up just overusing that, and it flared up. So I got that wrapped. So it looks kind of funny. But this goes back into some of the production stuff. Like you can sometimes get so wrapped up in all the things that need to be done that you don't think about the smartest way to do things, and you just keep kind of trying to power through, and eventually you realize that you're only human. Um, so as much as I don't personally like to use dictation software for replying to comments because it takes longer than just typing things out, but old age and all that. Anyway, back in October, I was doing VFX, and the reason that I jumped on VFX was quite simply we hadn't found anybody to carry the torch and to come on and do that for us. So at that point, it just became quicker for me to just learn how to do VFX and get the game looking as good as possible. Now, I'll be the first to admit that my VFX are never going to look as good as the VFX of someone who's been doing this for, even 3 to 5 years. Um, but I was able to get things up and going to the point that they're good enough to be where we are right now with our alpha. Um, in terms of who we're looking to hire next, we're still prioritizing. We need a graphics programmer, and the graphics programmer would be someone who not only can handle programming, but would be able to handle graphics things of all natures. So we would potentially have that person working on that as well. But we are also looking for a VFX artist and or an art lead who can do lots of different things. And a good art lead with enough experience, um, who can do a little bit of VFX, a little bit of modeling, a little bit of world building, a little bit of animation, a little bit of everything. A good art lead can do all those things. And a good art lead is going to have, 10, 15 or more years of experience. And we talked to a couple people. We had somebody who we thought we were going to hire, um, and it just didn't work out because of timing and scheduling. And then we just couldn't find anybody. This all happened around the same time at the latter half of last year. So I just said screw it and picked that up. So since the last time I've done a video, October, November was just, learning VFX and getting those VFX into the game. The next step has been, obviously we shipped all of the collector's edition items, which was, I don't want to say it was a nightmare, but it was definitely, we're going to do it different for future physical items. Um, to, One of the things we ran into was we didn't collect addresses when we took the orders, um, the first time around. And as a result, we ended up with several orders who just never got us their addresses. And we're literally still sitting on books, and maps. And it's a small enough number that it's not a big deal. Um, but I can imagine being in a position. I remember at one point going into Shroud of the Avatar's um, offices when Portalarium still had an office, uh, like the third visit I made, and there was several thousand boxes still stacked up in a corner in one of the rooms. And when they got rid of the physical office and went all remote, I believe Chris ended up taking all those to his garage. And the reality of that is just because they still had thousands of people from the Kickstarter, which was years ago, who never got their address to them, or they never claimed the physical stuff. And so they're just sitting on that stuff that they have to store that somewhere. And this goes back to what I was talking about in the topic of the week discussion on the forums in regards to physical merchandise. People don't think about storage space. And when you start talking about tens of thousands of orders, they have to be stored somewhere, and it can't be someone's home. And the reason it can't be someone's home is because when you're talking about that kind of quantity, um, there are rules and regulations for residential versus commercial space and what you're allowed to do with commercial versus residential space. Um, I won't get into all that here, but suffice to say, you can't be storing tens of thousands of stuff at your house due to a lot of issues with the shipping and getting the items to the location. Which, if it's your home, now suddenly you're interrupting the flow of the subdivision where you live, and that goes against residential zoning restrictions and all sorts of fun stuff. Um, so um, shipped the items, got all that stuff shipped. The next time we do things, we will be requiring people to, anytime we do any physical items, people will be required to give us their address up front. The only downside to that is people can change their address, in between the time that they order something and the time that it becomes time to ship something. So then you also have to deal with the nightmare of, how do you deal with people who have moved. And some people say, well, it's as simple as just sending out a mass email. It's not. It's not that simple. You think it is, but it's not, because people don't check their email, or people take weeks or months to check their email. It goes into the junk mail and they never get it. Whatever the case may be, people change email addresses. They never get it, and then suddenly you're starting to get messages from people 2 years down the road. Where's my pre-order? I paid all this money for this item. You never sent it to me, or worse, we did send it because we sent it to the address that we had on file, and that person never did a change of address form, and so they never got it. There's all these issues that can crop up when we're dealing with physical items, which is why we're trying really hard to keep those to a minimum. Um, we do have another collector's edition. It's not a collector's edition. It's another tier that's coming up when we reopen the pre-order store in March that will have a physical map attached to it. Um, we'll deal with those issues down the road because a map is something that people do want. Um, so we'll figure that out. Anyway, so we did all the shipping, did all that, got through November, and went into the holidays for Christmas time. I went up to the States to visit family for the month, and while I was up there, was just working with John a lot on just the back end side of business stuff. We were getting investors on board, and there's a lot of complexities with investors, which I don't know that I've talked about in great detail in any of these episodes yet. I don't know if I will until after we launch, because obviously there are complexities to investors and investing in particular, um, and those are things where you know you hear players talk about how they wish that companies would divulge their financials, talk about how much money they're really making because they want to know that they're being charged fairly for access to the game. It doesn't work like that, ladies and gentlemen. It just doesn't. Um, there are rules and regulations in place, on both sides of the fence, from the investor side of view, from the business side of view. Um, where that information you can't be talking about that in the public. It has nothing to do with the customer per se. It just has to do with business in general. When it comes to other companies, it doesn't matter if I don't personally view other companies as competition. I like to play all types of video games, and I like to think that we're all in this to make in good entertainment for people. But at the end of the day, it is business, and I don't want to sound conspiracy theorist when I say this, but corporate espionage is a thing, and there is a need to keep your cards as close to your chest as you can when it comes to the business side of the company. So it doesn't really matter how much players want there to be more transparency in business. It just can't happen, because the moment you start showing all that type of information in to the general public, the competition can do all sorts of fun stuff with that and essentially run you out of business. And that's something that you can't run. You just can't run that risk. So that's the long version of that. But basically, all of December was John and I just working on investment stuff, and then January, and once we got back into January, it was all about um, as we've been able to get more investors on board and everything else, we've been able to move more team members who had previously only been part time, working for free out of their own pockets, we were able to move them up into a position where they could actually start working full time on the game. Um, it's complicated. They're not actually drawing salaries. It's weird. We can't really talk about how that's working, but I can say that we do have more than half the team working full time now, which is a great place to be. It's also amazing for people who have been on this. I'm not one of those people, by the way. Uh, I still have a part-time job. Um, I was living off of a personal loan for like 2 years or something like that. But this year in particular, I do have a part-time job where I help a couple friends of mine. They run a travel publication called Hidden Compass, and I've actually been helping them all through last year as well. But last year was much more relaxed, a couple hours here and there. And this year it's actually a fairly steady gig, um, with some minimum weekly hours that I have to adhere to. Um, we were actually, my wife and I, that's where we went when we went to Paris last year in September. That's what we went for. They had a big workshop with Nat Geo photographer Catherine Carno and Nat Geo editor and writer Don George. They were the teachers of the class, and we did a big like 2 week workshop in Paris, a writing and photography workshop. And I went there to cover photography and videography for the program, and then I managed their social media for them basically. But you know, uh, Bobby, Joe, Andrew, we've moved these people, and we've got contractors and so on and so forth. So, and more people are getting moved the deeper we get into things. And then we have enough money stockpiled that, we're actively looking for an art lead and graphics programmer and animator, VFX, et cetera, et cetera. These are the key roles that we need. Um, we've got a senior programmer who we're hoping is going to be joining us soon. He's on another contract right now, and if that wraps up the way it's supposed to wrap up, we should be bringing him on soon. But even if we don't, then we'll go out and find somebody else because Bobby's at the point where he needs another programmer helping him with things. Um, so production wise, yeah, getting into January, getting all those things moving people into full time, and then starting to do quest writing for the upcoming build. Um, Also, January is when we decided we were going to go ahead and set the publishing date for the game, which was controversial in and of itself. There was definitely some trepidation from the team about whether or not that was something we were willing to do. We've talked about it since, uh, think, trying to think back here, late 2017 when we had our last big team meeting. We did not have a team meeting in 2018. Um, Sorry, 2019. End of 2018 was when we were in Minneapolis. In 2019, we did not do a team meeting because everybody was busy around. Normally, we do it in September. And like my brother had 4 weddings that he had to go to over the course of the summer, and so he just wasn't in a position to come. I think Richard had his 20th year anniversary with his wife. Um, I had to be in uh, Paris the first 2 weeks of September. So it worked out that like half the team was going to be busy around that time. So we just decided that we weren't going to do it last year. This year we are going to go ahead and do it again. We're going to be meeting up in Minneapolis again, um, because we have access to a cabin up on the lake there on the border of Canada. So it's a nice place to go, spend a couple weeks at the lake house and relax. Um, Anyway, I got to spin back around to the conversation. We first discussed setting a timeline and setting an actual publication date at the end of 2018, and we decided not to make it public at that point in time because we knew that we were going to have to go back and refactor the back end. We weren't sure how long that was going to take Bobby. He thought, 3 to 4 months. It ended up taking longer than that. Um, and we've always been in a position where we kind of knew, for ourselves when we wanted to publish. That date is somewhat arbitrary because it has nothing to do with, I don't want to say it has nothing to do, it has little to do with finances. I have to think about how I want to say that so that it makes sense. So it actually does have a lot to do with finances, but not in the way you might think. It's not that we don't have money. It's that we're at a point where we don't want to go beyond 8 years in terms of development because not because we don't have the money to keep going beyond that point, but because A, 8 years is enough. It's that's enough. Like we just need to get it out the door and let it do what it's gonna do. B, because we all have spouses and significant others who have been sitting here for the past 6 years while we've been working for free on this project who are like, hey, we need you guys to start drawing a paycheck. You've been doing this side hustle for free for a long time, and you guys just need to get it out there and get it done and make this your job and stop doing it part time. Make it your only job so that you actually can start working normal hours again. Because all of us, um, I've talked about this bluntly in the past. I QQ when people talk about crunch hours because as a business owner, I've been working 100 to 120 hour weeks for 6 years now with no pay. You know, so people who cry about crunch when they're getting paid time and a half on top of an already amazing salary to make video games for a living, which is fucking amazing, when you think about it. I have no sympathy for people who cry about crunch because I've been working crunch for 6 years. So, there's when we talk financials, it's not that we have to get it out the door because we need to make money. It's more along the lines of we just need to get it out there so that we can start making money, so that we can start drawing paychecks instead of only putting money in the bank and paying contractors and stuff. It's a very interesting position that we're in right now because we have enough money in the bank, um, and we have enough people on the team that we could launch the game in the next 2 years on our schedule, the Q4 2021. We have enough people and enough money to get the game to that deadline without hiring any additional staff and without needing any more money. So that's from a financial standpoint, this is one of the reasons we've been able to get so many investors on board is because as a small company, as a small business, we've been very, very frugal with our money. And because we bootstrapped for 6 years to get to this point, um, there's from an investor's standpoint, we have been very responsible with our money and our time. And we're in a unique position where we haven't taken loans and we haven't borrowed money, etc. So um, we have pretty much a clean slate when it comes to the financials, which is a really good place to be. Um, the sacrifices that have come along with that are not, if I had to do this all over again, and I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in one of the previous Dev Diary episodes, if I had to do it all over again, I would have taken a loan out or saved up money or something and done it differently. I would not have bootstrapped the way that we did it because this has been way too, I'm not crying about it, per se, but it has been very, very difficult um, to bootstrap this into existence. And it would have been much easier to just do like a Kickstarter, which is what everybody else does, to raise interest, raise a couple $1 million and show that there's enough interest, then that gives you enough. You still have to build your prototype, but in that case, you're only spending a couple of years to build the prototype, as opposed to the way we did it, which was everything from scratch on our own dime for a long time. Um, so January, anyway, getting back into that. Um, January was getting more people moved into full-time status, looking at hiring more people, starting to write quest lines, and making that decision to announce the publication date. Um, so it's been a blessing for us because we kind of looked at the overall range of crowdfunded games and other independent projects in the market. And we said, you know what? None of these other companies have set a date yet, and that's the one thing that we can say that we've not been afraid to do. In many other ways, we're behind everyone else. Absolutely, like we have not raised nearly as much money as say Crowfall or Pantheon or Camelot Unchained or any of those other games that are in development. We also don't have the celebrity status associated with all of those companies. All of those companies have industry veterans behind them. Ashes of Creation, not so much, but that guy had millions of his own money that he put in to get things going. But Camelot and Chain, you've got people on that team who did Star Wars Galaxies. I want to say there was a PvP game, Shadowlands, something. I don't remember. They have a team of veterans behind that game. Obviously, Pantheon had Brad McQuaid. He's no longer there, but his name is still associated with the project. And that's been a challenge for us for sure. Um, but despite the fact that we don't have celebrity status, and despite the fact that we haven't raised nearly as much money as those companies have, um, I can say that we're the only company that's not been afraid to set a publishing date and just say, fuck it, we're going to do it. And that's not to say that the game is going to be finished by that state, but no MMORPG in the history of MMORPGs has ever been finished when it's been launched. These are games as a service. They launch at point A, and then they get improved upon beyond that through patches, content updates, expansions, so on and so forth. So we just kind of set that date and said that's what we're shooting for. So we have a minimal product that we're going to be launching at that point, and it will have, it's not going to have all of the features that we want in the game. And I've been very public about this before. I've said we're not going to have housing in the game at launch. Not going to be there. Um, the full version of crafting will not be in the game at launch. Um, there will be things like that that aren't going to be in the launch product, but they will be added on in patches later on down the road. So part of the reason we decided to just set a date and stick with it was A, because we were beating everybody else to the punch, but also B, because when we started looking at some of these other independent companies like Warframe or Digital Extremes, like games like Warframe, um, games like uh, Gloria Victis, Path of Exile, these were all games that launched with teams of 7 to 8 people or less. Just launched the product and then were able to have enough of a solid customer base from the get-go that they could then start actually making money as a company. And once they were able to start making money, they were able to hire more personnel and improve upon the game through regular steady updates. And over the course of, I think Gloria Victis is a good example of this because they started off with, you know, um, 7 or 8 guys, I believe, and now they have 18. They did a public announcement about this, I want to say late 2019, um, where they talked about it. They'd sold several 100,000 copies, had expanded the team from 8 people to 18, and we're just really, you know, from the time because I think they launched their game in early access in like 2000. Now I'm not remembering, and I should have brought my research to the table for this episode, but I want to say it went early access like 2014 or 2016 or something. And in the course of several years, they've just built up a steady, solid, reputation. And there's still a lot of critics who look at their game and say, "Oh, the animations suck, the graphics aren't that good. It's not a AAA game." Who gives a shit? Like, they're a small company. They've expanded their team by 10 people. They've sold hundreds of thousands of copies. By all measures of whatever type of success you want to call it, they have made success and they have grown as a company from their launch point beyond. And so we looked at that and many other companies as well and said, you know what, rather than trying to launch a perfect product, um, we're just going to launch as good as we can get it and then we will build up from there. That's all we can do. Trying to search for perfection is stupid. Um, you're never going to be perfect. It doesn't matter how good your graphics are. It doesn't matter how good your gameplay is. It doesn't matter how good your stories are. There will always be people who don't like it and people who criticize. So you shouldn't be focusing on that. And I know there have been people on the team who have, and rightfully so, been paranoid about having a poor launch because you can look at, say, what happened to Vanguard, or uh, well, let's stick with that one for the example for the moment, and then we'll get to the other one. Looking at what happened to Vanguard, but I also look at Vanguard and say, yeah, but the unfortunate reality of Vanguard is by the time they had gotten to the point where they had launched that game, they were $40 million in. we're not. Like we're nowhere near $40 million. We're definitely millions in, but not 40 million in. And because they were working against money that was given to them from Microsoft, you know, and all this other stuff, like we're not working against that type of an arrangement because we bootstrapped this to where we are today. So we don't have that debt hanging over our heads, which is what gives us the unique position to be able to launch the product, even if it's not perfect, and just grow it from the ground up, like Gloria Victis and like Path of Exile and like many of these other independent games. So that was the base decision in January to say, fuck it, let's just push it out, get it to where it needs to be. We'll launch it and then we'll improve upon it from there. And just I think our reputation's already been established over the last several years as a company who does what they say they're going to do and makes steady progress regardless of the critics. We're not frivolously spending money. We're not making bad business decisions. You know, we're just putting our heads down and getting the work done, which is hard, but it is what it is. So January was just making that decision and getting the stage 3 blog post out there, and then once we made that decision was when Wendy and I went into basically we've been since February. Early February was revamping the website and the forums, which was Richard and I. Um, and then once that was done, mid-February, excuse me, early February. Fuck, I forget when we did that now. Maybe it was like late January. Um, Late January or February. And then once that was done, um, we went into the beginning stages of our first marketing campaign, which is reaching out to streamers and getting content creators on board with an affiliate program, which we're basically doing exactly what ArenaNet is doing. Um, ArenaNet gives a 10% commission to their content affiliates. We're giving a 10% base pay, and it goes up to 15%, which is higher than industry standards. So we're actually paying more than AAA companies in terms of commissions. Um, I'm comfortable doing that because I worked as an influencer for many years and in the content industry in the travel space. So I'm intimately familiar with this on how this all works. Um, and working with influencers is bar none the best way to get things done in the modern era. Um, I learned a lot from uh, one of the main guys behind the Costa Brava Tourism Board, Jama. Um, we've worked with him multiple times over the years, and he's just a really good guy. And Costa Brava, Spain, has been listed number one tourist destination on the planet like two or three times now. A couple years ago, they won I want to say it was the European Marketing Award in the travel space. They won the award for that on a marketing campaign that employed I believe, six bloggers and videographers, and they won against competition from Ryanair and Carnival Cruise Lines and these companies that are spending tens of millions of dollars on their marketing campaigns internationally, and they won it with a small group of content creators that they only spent, by comparison, they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in comparison to spending tens of millions, and they won the award just because of the quality of the content that we were producing and the amount of traffic it got and the amount of influence that was generated by these content creators and the amount of people and just everything that revolved around the success of that campaign. And there's something to be said for um, working with content creators, and our strategy is a lot different than, and I'm not going to divulge all this, but I will give you a very blanket version. The reason that we decided to do an affiliate program as opposed to only working with, say, one or two big streamers, we're not interested in the big streamers. It sounds weird. Like, why wouldn't you want to be working with the big guys who have like 1.5 million followers? Because you're not necessarily going to get the best value for your money. I'm going to give a very good example of this. Um, a few years ago, and I'm a little bit vague on the specifics because it's been a while. I did a presentation at a travel conference, and it was right after the Fire Festival. Um, Look that up if you're not familiar with it. And around the same time, the governor for the state of Florida had decided to basically just strip the budget from the tourism board for the state of Florida because they had frivolously spent millions of dollars on these influencer campaigns the year before, hiring people like um, hiring like rap artists and hip hop artists and stuff. Pitbull was my favorite. They spent $1 million to get Pitbull to represent the state of Florida as like a representative of the tourism board to bring tourism in. People don't follow Pitbull for his travel advice. They follow Pitbull because he's a hip hop artist and he's like throwing money around and got naked women dancing and he's talking about that hip hop lifestyle. Like it's club life. That's why people follow Pitbull. So, you know, the illusion there was that by going to a person like Pitbull and giving him $1 million, he has, tens of millions of followers and it's going to get guaranteed traffic to our state. That's not necessarily the case. Um, Micro influencers or influencers who only have small followings on a ROI basis tend to get you far better results than working with massive people because you're able to influence people at a far more direct range. So if I've got someone who's got 40 followers, 40 people who tune in every single day, I'm probably going to be able to convert half of those people. Whereas you look at someone with, 1.5 million, you might only be able to convert, half of a percent or 1% of that audience. And people go, yeah, but the volume of that 1% against the 50% of your and that's not the point. The point is that you're getting a far better ROI from a smaller influencer, and more importantly, you're influencing friends and family. Um, so it's the domino effect of this guy trusts this guy and he's going to recommend it to his two friends, and this guy trusts this guy and he's going to recommend it to his brother and wife and his brother's wife, and this guy trusts this guy and he's going to refer it to these guys, as opposed to the bigger streamers who often have followers who just follow in mass. Um, so there's also the other aspect of it, which is saturation from lots of different viewpoints, which is something that's worked very well for the Costa Brava Tourism Board in terms of um, by having lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of smaller content creators working for them, regardless of level of influence and regardless of celebrity, you get a certain level of just saturation where it's not. I gave this example. We were having an interview the other day, and somebody asked, well, why do you want me? Because I'm not a big MMORPG gamer. I play these other games, and so why do you think I would be a good fit? And I said, because your voice is unique. If I go and watch players who are part of ESO's stream team, or if I go watch people who are part of ArenaNet's affiliate program and I watch them play Guild Wars 2 or I watch them play Elder Scrolls Online, as a general rule, it's the same exact shit stream by stream by stream by stream. They're all doing giveaways. They're all playing the exact same way. They're all, there's not a lot of variation. There is some. I'm not saying that all streamers are like that, but I'm saying that as a general rule, when you look at, you know, that type of environment, um, it's a lot of the same, right? And our approach to things has been to, we've been looking at content creators who are different and who have lots of different unique voices, because the way Costa Brava did it was, you know, our destination is about more than just one thing. Our destination is about all these things. And so we want lots of different points of view representing us because that brings in tourism from all these different places. So we're looking at tabletop gamers. We're looking at people who like to read novels. We're looking at people who play RPGs. We're not just looking at people who stream MMORPGs. and there's a reason for that because I'm far more interested in the saturation of lots of different points of view who are going to be showing our game off to the world in lots of different ways as opposed to the same sort of cut and paste version that you see a lot of times from other games. This also goes back to when I really studied a lot of how George Lucas was able to get Star Wars off the ground. Even though it was seemed like this impossible thing, but one of the things they did was just, he had Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill and those actors out there going to these comic conventions before Comic Con was a thing. These little conventions where only 200 or 300 people were, but his actors would show up with the T-shirts and the posters, and they would be, they're so hyped about this project that they would be through their sheer enthusiasm convincing these 200 or 300 people at these conferences, convincing a portion of them that, hey, I am interested in this, what you're talking about. This is awesome. Like, I'll totally take a t-shirt and a movie poster. When's it coming out? I'll be there. And just through saturation and enthusiasm and that domino effect, they were able to get people to the theater on opening day. So that's, in a nutshell, marketing in a very simplistic version, which is what I've been working on all throughout, basically the latter half of January into February, but all throughout the month of February. So doing all these interviews and working with Eloa on talking to all these streamers. We've been doing sometimes 2, 3 interviews a day, um, and these interviews are at least an hour, hour and a half long, sometimes longer. Because everybody knows I like to talk about my game. I mean, I'm already 41 minutes into this episode, but it's the first diary I've done in a while, so um, yeah, it's gonna be a longer one. Um, Obviously, a lot of what I've been doing too is like you can see on the image behind me, like getting into the build and sharing screenshots and little video snippets with our community to start getting the hype going. Um, all of this over the last couple of weeks in particular has, we relaunched the website, started pushing out snippets, etc. People were like, oh my, we were on social media, we were dead for a year, so completely black. And within the first 2, 3 weeks since the website's been up, now we've got interviews scheduled with MMORPG.com and Massively OP and other places, and we've got a whole bunch of new subscribers at YouTube and Discord users and forum users. We have the topic of the week going on, and just all this stuff is starting to swirl, and that's literally just a matter of coming back after a year of not doing anything and now starting to publish on a daily basis some type of social media material and regular communication, like answering over 600 comments over the course of like 4 days, 3 or 4 days, um, at various websites. Um, that's all part of my job, in terms of marketing. But then I also have my fingers in, you know, uh, the writing of the quest content for the game, and I still manage the art team because we don't have an art lead yet. So I still am the person who's managing all of that. So there's regular meetings with Mikhail and Joe and beyond. Um, I got a meeting coming up with Veronica, she's been working on all of like the character concept art for the Ellen High and Dwerhe and so on and so forth. And now she's actually starting to work on chapter work from the book. Um, if you haven't picked it up, Echoes of the Past. It's on Amazon, digital and print. We just did an actual little snippet preview today. One of her new pieces came out for chapter one, I believe, is that chapter, the trials. Put that excerpt out this morning. So I mean, I still handle all that. I work with John on overseeing the music stuff, so I'm kind of hands off with a lot of the music unless it's a crucial piece. So, like we actually just finished up the main, what we're calling, it's the first time we've done like a main theme for the game. Whether or not whether or not it is the main theme of the actual game is yet to be determined, but it's something that we feel strongly enough about where it's at right now that we're going to be using it as a main theme, unless we come up with something better in the next couple of years. But that was a you know multi-week process to get that composed and sent over to me, and the back and forth. I think we went through 3 or 4 iterations of that, and then rearranging certain sections of it and to get it to where I wanted it to be. We obviously did where is it over here? Yeah, we did the new logo, um, and etc. All of that was done over December. Um, Trying to think what else I'm missing. Uh, oh, on top of that, I've been for the last 6 months, playing lots of World of Warcraft with our World of Warcraft Classic with our community, which that's something that's been very important to me as often as I can to maintain a presence with our gaming community and play games with people in between our alpha. It's not always possible. It's been possible for the last few months, like the last 5, 6 months, because I wasn't as busy. But now that we're getting into uh, essentially we're in crunch mode right now, like actual crunch for April. So all of February has been just the hours have been ramping up towards the end of the month. All of us have been putting in 14-hour days minimum for the past like 3 weeks, um, on top of gaming. So it's a little taxing, but it is. I do have the benefit of since I work from home office, um, it is a long day, but it is broken up. I get up pretty early. Um, Recently I've been, what I've been doing, the routine for like the last 8 months is I get up about 6 or 7, um, and I'll get in a good 3 hour chunk of work, 3 to 4. About 9:30, 10 o'clock, I'll go to the gym. I get back, I'm there for an hour ish. Um, get back, have a shower, go back into it, and then I'll work till about, 2ish. And excuse me, usually around 1 or 2, I'll take a nap. And then I get back up and I just keep going until about 6. And then from at 6 o'clock, my wife and I have a pretty regular routine. We're just at 6 o'clock, we go out, we go for a walk. And then um, come back and I just keep working until late at night. Or in the case of if I'm playing Warcraft with the community, I'll switch over and do that from like 8 to 11 or something. But those traditionally, that's been only like Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturday nights. And then the last 2 weeks, I haven't even played Tuesdays because I just don't have enough time. And this week, I didn't even play Thursday because I didn't have enough time because I was working until right up until like 8:30 testing. Which brings me to the next thing that I've had to start doing. So we don't actually have a QA team. So our QA team literally is me and John, or John and I should say. Um, and obviously, the weekly tests that we run with our early access community are invaluable because we actually can get in other people to see things. But for the most part, John and I are in there for 3 to 4 hours a day minimum, doing QA testing so that Bobby can get changes implemented. And, he'll do just depending on the day, but sometimes it could be 1 or 2 builds a day, and sometimes it could be 4 to 6 builds a day. Just depends on what we're catching and what low-hanging fruit can be done. Um, so on top of quest writing and VFX and marketing and community management and social media and all this other stuff, um, there's also the QA side of things, which has to be done. Now, in a traditional game environment, we would actually have a QA team who would be doing that, but we don't. So we do that ourselves. And obviously, as we bring more testers on in stage 3, that'll start to shift a little bit, more towards the testing community. But at some point, we will end up needing to bring on, full-time QA testers, at least 1 or 2. Um, and but we're not there yet. That's still a ways out. It's definitely not a full-time job at the moment. Like I said, 3 to 4 hours a day is enough to keep things kind of ahead of Bobby at the moment. When we get to the point where it starts to become a 6 to 8 hour a day thing, that's when we need to consider, hiring an actual QA tester. But these are just the things. This episode was all about the realities of just MMOR, MMORPG production with a small team. We have 12 people, so it's everybody's wearing multiple hats. Some of us wear more than others. I would say, you can look at people like Andrew as an example, or my brother. They pretty much stick to world building. Um, Richard kind of sticks to engineering and website stuff with me, and helping with um, all the back end. LOS sticks pretty much to community management and public outreach. But like John does QA testing, he does he's doing all the CFO stuff now, and COO. So, just as much as I'm the CEO and creative director, he's the CFO and COO, and then Bobby's the CTO and lead programmer, but we're all doing multiple things. I'd say I probably wear the most hats, but that's kind of just the nature of being the founder of the company and the founder of the team. That's kind of my responsibility. Obviously, the deeper we get into this, I mean, in the very beginning, I was doing all the stuff that John's doing now. And then John stepped up a couple years ago and started to help me out with that. So, like, I used to do all the bookkeeping and all the finances on top of everything else. And now he helps out with that. He's kind of basically just taken that off my hands. I mean, we still have like once a month we'll have a financial meeting, but for the most part, I don't look at the books anymore. I let him do that. And the bigger we get and the deeper we get into this, the more we get on, the less that I will be, the less hats I will be wearing, because I am totally not afraid to delegate. Um, that is one thing I've learned over the years is you know there's only so much you can do by yourself, and you just have to delegate to everybody else, or just for your sanity. Um, it's there's a lot of moving parts. Um, so yeah, in terms of just production, everybody's wearing multiple hats. I talked about this before in like the multitasking episode and stuff. But definitely recently, coming in and also doing Q&A. A lot of stuff going on. The nice thing, so again, we are hiring, and you can go over to stormhavenstudios.com/careers. Share that stuff out, folks, because I would love to find an art director, and we would love to find a graphics programmer, because these are people who can add polish to the game, which is going to be needed. It's not a huge priority for us in alpha, but the deeper we get into the project, the better it's going to be to get a head start on this stuff, so that we're not doing all of the polish on the back end, in the last 3 to 6 months before launch. Um, Having a good graphics programmer is a high priority for us. I'd say the number one priority is a graphics programmer, followed by an art lead, a talented art lead who can handle, a little bit of VFX, a little bit of everything like I was talking about, a little bit of animation, a little bit of modeling, a little bit of, you know, everything world building. Um, or just someone who can do VFX. We're definitely hiring. Share that stuff out. We're paying industry standard rates within the U.S. We're not paying AAA rates, but we are paying well. We are paying Austin, Texas rates for game developers, so that should give you a good ballpark to shoot for. Um, so I would urge people to apply if you have the experience, and even if you don't, share that stuff out, because we would love to find the right people, especially for those of you who are fans of the game and who appreciate what we're doing. The more people we get on this project, the better we can make it look, and the more that we can get in before we get to launch. And that's a reality too that we're working against. Is Bobby and Richard, especially Bobby. It's kind of been they've been between the two of them, they've managed to make it work. Um, like I was talking earlier about how like John and myself and Bobby, we're all working 14-hour days right now, and you can only do that for so long before it really starts to wear on you. And this is where, hopefully like I said, we've got a programmer that's hopefully going to be coming on board in March, if everything works out the way we want it to. But regardless, we're hiring more people, and the more people we get on board, the better it is for everybody. The better it is for us working on the project, the better it is for the community, because it ends up being a better product by the time it gets to launch. I would say that we're already looking pretty good. We're definitely lacking in animation department, animation and VFX, and optimization for things like shaders and lighting. A good example of this is there are things that we want to do with clouds and fog and stuff in this new zone that we're just not able to do because we don't have anyone on the team who has graphics programming experience. We're also not taking advantage of the most modern shader options with Unity because we don't have a graphics programmer who understands how to work with the new shaders. So our VFX are okay, but we're using older technology, uh, which is not something that, you know, in terms of gameplay experience, it doesn't impact the game. But from a visual perspective, working with the new shaders means that the graphics look better, means that the effects look better. So that's a polished thing that we would love to have someone on board who could do that kind of stuff. But this is when I went back, when I went back to what I was saying earlier in terms of, we have enough staff now and we have the finances to be able to make it to launch without needing additional money or additional staff. Um, but I would argue that even though our game looks decent enough, you know, launching a decent enough product is not going to be enough for some people. Some people are going to need to see, a double A, if not triple A level of polish and optimization. And that's why we want to hire these additional team members so that we can get that level of polish added to the game before we get to launch, as opposed to doing it later, because we can always do it later, but we would prefer to do it beforehand so that it can look as good as it can be by the time we get to launch. But that's not to say that it's going to impede our launch in any way, shape, or form. We There's this mandate of it's good enough, and that's something that you just have to in business. That's as a general rule. Once you have a product where it's good enough, then that's a launch worthy product. Your minimal viable product, your minimal marketable product is something that is good enough to be marketed and it's good enough to survive on its own as long as it's fun and it's playable. And we already know that it's fun and it's playable, so now it's just a matter of adding on to what we have and fleshing that out as much as we can between now and launch date. So I'm about an hour in, um, which is a pretty good chunk of time for the first Dev Diary episode I've done in a while. Um, I will probably do another one. I can't tell you when. Like originally, I thought I was going to do these every 2 weeks. That's just not feasible. I don't always have enough to talk about every 2 weeks, so I'll just put these out when I have new stuff to talk about. And obviously, the other thing that's going on here is every Monday we publish the Mondays and MMORPG episodes, which gives folks a chance to listen to Elo and I talk about game related stuff. Um, I may do these once a month. That would be nice. In a perfect world, I might be able to do them once a month. But I would also say that we're going to be showing such a lot of stuff through our content creators um, coming up in April and beyond that you'll be able to get a lot of behind the scenes details through those affiliates because they're going to have me on their shows to do Q&As and the like. And so I'll be talking about a lot of this stuff on their shows and in interviews with places like Massively and MMORPG.com and stuff. Um, I would be interested, if you guys can let me know in the comments what do or in the Discord for Renfield's Refuge, let me know what are some of the things that you would like me to talk about or show in these Dev Diary episodes. Obviously, keeping in mind that I can't divulge financials, and there are things that are behind NDAs as far as the game itself goes that I can't show or talk about. But I would just, let's have an open discussion about what you folks think you want to hear and see about, and I'll talk about those things as best I can and share screenshots whenever I can. Obviously, once we get to stage 3, we'll be at a point where I can actually share game snippets and stuff. So it might be something where I can log into the game and do something live while I'm running around and talk about a certain aspect of game development. But I would just love to know what everybody wants to hear about or where they want to see, and we'll just see what we can come up with. In the meantime, looks like there's a new build that just got pushed out actually. So this is perfect timing for me to wrap up and go patch up and do a few hours of Q&A testing tonight so that Bobby can keep working. So thanks for listening, everybody. If you have questions, comments, etc., don't forget to drop them in this YouTube video or over at the Discord. And please subscribe. hit the bell button. And if you liked this episode, share it out. I appreciate that. I'm actually getting close to the point where I could customize my URL if I get 100 subscribers. So that would be awesome. Because this originally started off as just like a part-time thing, and we've grown from like 20 followers to 80 something now. So we're getting close. So thanks everyone. Until next time. Cheers.